March 19th, 2026, 3:47 a.m. local time. Israeli F-35I Adir strike aircraft released 4 GBU-39 small-diameter bombs over central Iran. The targets were not nuclear facilities, not missile production plants, not military command centers. The targets were 4 pumping stations along the Imam Khomeini pipeline, the single most critical piece of energy infrastructure in Iran. The pipeline that moves 1.6 million barrels of crude oil per day from Iran's southern oil fields to the Abadan refinery complex on the Persian Gulf Coast. 4 bombs, 4 pumping stations. And Iran's ability to export oil just dropped by 40% in under 2 minutes. Let me tell you why this changes everything. The Imam Khomeini pipeline is Iran's economic lifeline. Iran produces 3.8 million barrels of oil per day. 1.6 million barrels move through this single pipeline system. That's 42% of total production capacity, flowing through 900 kilometers from Khuzestan oil fields to export terminals at Abadan. When you hit the pumping stations, you stop the flow completely. Crude oil doesn't move by gravity. It moves by mechanical pressure, generated at stations every 80 to 120 kilometers. Destroy the pumps, the oil sits in the pipe. Storage tanks fill within 48 hours. Wells shut down. Restarting takes weeks or months. Here are the numbers that matter. Iran's government budget is 60% dependent on oil revenue. When oil exports drop 40%, government revenue drops by approximately 24%. That's $8 billion per month in lost income. Iran's foreign currency reserves, the money needed to import food, medicine, industrial equipment, those reserves are already depleted from years of sanctions. An $8 billion monthly revenue loss is not something Iran can absorb for more than 60 days before the economic consequences become politically destabilizing. The strike happened 3 days ago. Iran has 57 days before the mathematics of collapse become unavoidable. The GBU-39 small-diameter bomb is a 250-pound precision-guided munition with a range of approximately 110 kilometers when released from high altitude. Cost per unit is roughly $40,000. Israel used 4 of them. Total munitions cost for the strike, $160,000. The damage to the pumping stations is estimated at $400 million to replace and 6 months minimum to restore full operational capacity. That's a cost-exchange ratio of 1 to 2,500. You spend $160,000 to inflict $400 million in damage and 6 months of strategic paralysis. This is the mathematics that ends conflicts, not through military defeat, through economic unsustainability. But here's the detail that should make every Iranian military planner physically ill. The strike happened at 3:47 a.m. Iranian air defense systems detected the F-35s at 3:51 a.m., 4 minutes after the bombs hit, not 4 minutes before, 4 minutes after. The S-400 system that Russia delivered to Iran 2 months ago, the system that was supposed to make Iranian airspace impenetrable to Israeli stealth aircraft, detected nothing until the explosions were already happening. And here's why. The F-35s never entered the S-400 radar coverage zone. They didn't have to. The GBU-39 has a glide range of 110 kilometers. The S-400 radar coverage extends approximately 400 kilometers from the battery position, but the effective engagement range against low radar cross-section targets like the GBU-39 is significantly less. The Israelis launched from 120 kilometers outside Iranian airspace, released the weapons, and turned back before crossing the border. The bombs glided to target autonomously using GPS and inertial navigation. No Iranian radar ever saw the aircraft. By the time the bombs were detected on radar, they were 30 seconds from impact. No air defense system in the world can engage a target with 30 seconds of warning time. Iran's official response came 11 hours after the strike. A statement from the Supreme National Security Council declaring that Iran will respond with severe retaliation against Israeli infrastructure at a time and place of Iran's choosing. The statement specified that the response will be proportional in severity, but disproportional in scope. That phrasing is important because it signals what Iran is planning. Proportional in severity means Iran will target Israeli economic infrastructure, not military targets. Disproportional in scope means Iran will not limit retaliation to a single strike. This is Iran saying we will escalate horizontally, not vertically. We will widen the conflict, not intensify it, at a single point. What does that mean operationally? It means Iran is going to hit Israel's energy infrastructure, water desalination plants, electrical grid substations, port facilities, anything that keeps the Israeli economy functioning. And Iran will do it across multiple locations simultaneously to overwhelm Israeli air defenses and maximize economic disruption. This is not speculation. This is reading the language that Iranian military doctrine uses when signaling escalation intent. Proportional severity, disproportional scope. That's the formula Iran used in 2019 when it struck Saudi oil facilities at Abqaiq and Khurais in response to economic pressure. 15 targets hit simultaneously. Processing capacity cut by 50%, recovery time measured in months. Iran is telling Israel that the same operational model is coming. Let me walk you through what the pipeline strike destroyed and why repair takes months. A pumping station contains 4 to 6 centrifugal pumps, each driven by gas turbine engines generating 15,000 to 20,000 horsepower. Each pump weighs 40 tons and requires specialized installation. But the real problem is the control systems. SCADA networks monitor pressure, flow, temperature across the entire pipeline. The strikes destroyed the control buildings. Iran has to rebuild the entire digital infrastructure managing pipeline operations. Here's the timeline for replacement. Pumps have to be manufactured. Lead time for industrial centrifugal pumps of this scale is 16 to 24 weeks from order to delivery. That assumes the manufacturer has production capacity available, which is not guaranteed. Then you have transportation. These are not components you put on a cargo plane. They move by heavy transport ship, which adds another 4 weeks. Then installation, which requires constructing new pump foundations, aligning shafts to tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch, and pressure testing the entire system. Add another 8 weeks. Then SCADA system reconstruction, programming, and integration testing, another 6 weeks minimum. Total timeline from strike to operational restoration, 34 to 42 weeks. That's 8 to 10 months. Iran's official statement said repairs would take 6 weeks. That is technically possible if you bypass destroyed stations and reroute flow through alternate paths. But the Imam Khomeini pipeline doesn't have alternate paths. It's a linear system. 4 pumping stations down means 400 kilometers of pipeline is non-operational. There is no workaround. The economic impact is already visible. Brent crude oil prices jumped $7 per barrel within 12 hours of the strike on market expectations that 1.6 million barrels per day of Iranian crude is offline for months. That price increase benefits every oil producer except Iran. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Russia, the United States, all of them gain revenue from higher oil prices caused by Iranian supply disruption. Iran loses revenue because it cannot sell oil, it cannot move to export terminals. This is the strategic paradox of energy infrastructure attacks. The victim suffers immediate economic damage, while competitors profit from the same event that caused the damage. Israel just handed every oil-producing adversary of Iran a financial windfall while crippling Iran's ability to fund its own military response. But here's the calculation that should terrify Israeli planners. Iran has already declared that retaliation is coming, and Iran has the capability to execute the threat. Iran operates approximately 3,000 ballistic and cruise missiles with ranges sufficient to hit any target in Israel. Iron Dome, David's Sling, and Arrow defense systems have interceptor stockpiles estimated at 2,000 to 2,500 total missiles across all 3 systems. If Iran fires 3,000 missiles in a sustained campaign over 72 hours, Israeli defenses run out of interceptors before the attack ends. The math is simple and unavoidable. Attacker has more projectiles than defender has interceptors. Defender loses. The only question is how long Israel can sustain defensive operations before depletion forces a shift to offensive retaliation or acceptance of undefended strikes hitting critical infrastructure. Iran's retaliation will not happen immediately. Iranian doctrine emphasizes strategic patience. The goal is not to respond quickly. The goal is to respond effectively at the moment when response creates maximum leverage. Right now, global attention is focused on the pipeline strike. Markets are pricing in Iranian supply disruption. Diplomatic channels are active, trying to de-escalate. Iran gains nothing by retaliating in this environment. But wait 3 weeks. Let markets stabilize. Let diplomatic efforts produce statements about restraint and proportionality. Let Israeli public attention shift to other concerns. Then strike. That's when retaliation creates maximum psychological and economic impact. When people thought the crisis was over. When defenses are relaxed. When the assumption is that Iran backed down. Iranian military planners understand that the perception of control is more valuable than the reality of immediate action. The Israeli strike also exposed something Iran did not want exposed: the vulnerability of its energy infrastructure to precision strike. Iran has spent 2 decades hardening its nuclear facilities, burying them under mountains, surrounding them with overlapping air defense systems. But pipelines cannot be buried for 900 kilometers. Pumping stations cannot be hidden underground. Refineries cannot be protected by concrete and earth cover. The infrastructure that actually generates revenue, that actually keeps the Iranian economy functioning, is completely exposed to the type of strike Israel just demonstrated. And now every regional adversary knows it. Saudi Arabia knows it. The UAE knows it. The United States knows it. Iran's strategic vulnerability is no longer theoretical. It's confirmed by satellite imagery showing 4 destroyed pumping stations and oil flow rates that dropped 40% overnight. Here's what the next 60 days look like. Iran attempts to restore partial pipeline flow by rerouting through undamaged sections and operating at reduced pressure. This gets capacity back to maybe 60% of normal within 4 weeks. Not enough to restore full export revenue, but enough to prevent complete economic collapse. Meanwhile, Iran prepares retaliatory strikes against Israeli infrastructure. Target selection focuses on facilities that are economically critical, but not militarily defended. Water desalination plants along the Mediterranean coast. These facilities provide 80% of Israel's drinking water. They are large, visible, and impossible to harden against missile strikes. Electrical substations in the Tel Aviv metropolitan area. Israel's power grid operates on narrow margins. Lose 3 major substations, and rolling blackouts affect 4 million people. Port infrastructure at Haifa and Ashdod, container terminals, fuel storage tanks, loading cranes, all soft targets that generate massive economic disruption when damaged. Iran will strike these targets simultaneously using a mix of cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, and drones to saturate Israeli air defenses. Launch 200 projectiles at 20 targets. Israeli defenses can intercept maybe 140 of them. That leaves 60 getting through. And 60 precision strikes hitting water, power, and port infrastructure is enough to create the economic paralysis Iran is promising. Israel then faces the same choice Iran faces now: accept the damage and call for de-escalation, or retaliate with additional strikes that expand the conflict further. Neither choice restores the economic function that was lost. Both choices lead to deeper involvement in a war of attrition that neither side can sustain indefinitely. The pipeline strike was strategically brilliant and strategically catastrophic at the same time. Brilliant because it inflicted maximum economic damage with minimal military risk. Catastrophic because it triggered an escalation cycle that has no clear off-ramp. Iran cannot ignore a strike that costs $8 billion per month in lost revenue. Iran's domestic political situation does not allow the government to appear weak in the face of direct economic attack. Retaliation is not optional. It's required by the internal logic of regime survival. And Israeli retaliation to Iranian retaliation is equally non-optional. You cannot allow adversaries to strike your critical infrastructure without response. That invites additional attacks. Both sides are now locked in a sequence where each retaliation justifies the next escalation, and neither side has an incentive to stop first. This is the structure of conflicts that expand beyond anyone's initial intent. Not because leaders are irrational, because the domestic and strategic imperatives created by each action make restraint politically impossible. Iran's pipeline is hit. Iran must respond. Israel's infrastructure gets hit. Israel must respond. The cycle continues until something breaks. Either economic collapse forces one side to accept terms, or external powers intervene with sufficient leverage to impose a ceasefire, or the conflict expands to include additional participants who change the strategic calculus entirely. Right now, we are 72 hours into this cycle. Iran has 57 days before economic mathematics force decisions that no amount of strategic patience can delay. Israel has maybe 90 days before interceptor depletion makes sustained defense impossible. The window for managed de-escalation is not months, it's weeks. And every day that passes without diplomatic breakthrough is a day closer to the point where military logic overrides political restraint. Share this video because mainstream coverage is showing you the strike. They're showing you the damage. They're showing you the official statements. They're not showing you the economic depletion timelines that make this strike a strategic countdown clock. They're not showing you the interceptor math that makes sustained defense unsustainable. They're not showing you the escalation structure that makes retaliation inevitable, regardless of what any leader wants. Both narratives are true, only one explains what happens next. The pipeline is hit, the countdown has started, and there is no reset button that stops the clock.